How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit?
In a recent appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast, Jordan Peterson lamented the expansion, the growth, and access of psychopaths on the right. These dark triad individuals, they're not real. They're lying to steal power. And he was talking about Candace Owens. I tweeted at him, who are you talking about? Because he mentions more than one individual. Now, we know he's talking about Candace Owens because he referenced her on X. I've got the tweet where he called her a Pharisee. And in this clip, he says much the same. He's now pushing this study, which I believe, well, as many people are pointing out, has partnered with the Anti-Defamation League of all organizations. The study that claims people pushing the phrase Christ is king are actually anti-Semites. Okay, that's a whole weird aside, which we can't talk about. But it's interesting to see this split. And what I see from Jordan Peterson, who I like Jordan Peterson. But I see this appeal to authority, which I largely do not agree with. There have been numerous instances where organizations have come together and tried to assert a fact study, which proves in our report. And that is not a convincing argument. But let's do this. Let me play the clip from the Joe Rogan podcast. He also appeared on Fox News arguing much the same. And then we'll break down who he's talking about and what he's talking about. Here you go.
I think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well,
without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I think
he's one
what
level.
they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no.
But
what he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is
it's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas, for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem. The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits. They're Machiavellian.
Oh, I'm sorry, dark tetrad. I said triad. I was wrong.
That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas, and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain, right?
Okay, let's pause real quick because that's him basically saying Candace Owens, okay? So I've got the tweet from, let me see if I can pull it up here. Right, here you go. Jordan Peterson tweeted, Candace Owens is a true pharisaical pretender. She vociferously proclaims her devotion to Christ for no other reason than to evaluate a perceived status. Her outrage is designed not to shout the truth from the rooftops, build bridges, or make peace, but to subvert Christianity itself with its new force to her own purposes. She is literally using God's name in vain. There are few more unforgivable sins. Jordan Peterson says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. Whoa! Yo. Okay. This is some kind of like inter-factional beef. When Jordan Peterson mentions the cluster B, dark tetrad individuals, they go to where power is. That's the corporate press right now. That's what all of that was. The reason why they're marching in lockstep, the reason they're lying is because they're not there to seek truth. They're there to seek power and influence. I work for some of these organizations. The reason people get jobs there is because they want the platform to get followers. They want to be famous. They tell you things like, I always wanted to be a muckraker like Nellie Bly. I wanted to be like her. You're like, oh, so you're looking for vanity and attention. Okay, that's a bit unfair. If you want to emulate good behaviors, that's fine. But typically for a lot of these people, they're not saying they wanted to do the good work. They're saying they wanted that position and reverence that came with it.
is they proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or Islam. They invade the idea space, and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more, particularly because the left had to face it when they were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are...
Yo, did homie just call Candace Owens a psychopathic parasite? Come on. Look, I tweeted after this clip saying, at Dr. Peterson, like, who are you referring to? He called Candace Owens a Pharisee, a pharisaical pretender to the Lord names in vain. He then does this segment, this bit. They've got this document he put out. Yo, he's literally calling her a psychopathic parasite.
Who are only in it for narcissistic benefit.
So that's his play, but he does have another clip that I think we have this. Jack Posobiec points this out. He says, Jordan Peterson appears on Hannity and promotes his report linking Christ as King to political extremism. He then criticizes internet anonymity as a cause of extremism. Hannity does not push back.
Distinction between the political and the psychological, and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian, they use their language to manipulate, they're narcissistic, they want unearned social status and reputation, they're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory, and they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as King as a manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically on the right. And this report identified the same sort of people on the left. But it's not primarily political.
Okay, I got to pause there. This is the problem I'm having with this. Candace Owens has, and as far as I know, never used the phrase Christ is King to insult somebody, to troll somebody. That we had talked about this on Timcast IRL because she had used it in reference to, I think, Bridget Macron being accused of being a man. And some people said, why do hashtag Christ is King in that post? And it was because it was part of a larger thread having to do with the argument of some sort. Like, it wasn't just that she said, Bridget Macron is a man, Christ is King. And people were like, why would you do that? It was actually part of a longer thread. Say what you want about Candace Owens. The thing that I find absurd about that argument immediately was, I'm like, even if you think Candace Owens is a psychopath who's pretending, she is nowhere near stupid enough to walk into something as dumb as that, okay? More importantly, I don't think she's trolling anybody. I think Candace genuinely is saying Christ is King. Certainly, you can argue that Candace is of a certain personality type, which drives towards success. And the people who don't like her political views will argue that drive is psychopathic or sociopathic. However, the people who agree with everything she's saying is going to point out that she's a hardworking, passionate individual. So I don't know. I have no, what is gained by using this line of attack against individuals? And I'll tell you why I don't like it. Because they have tried to do this to individuals like me and others. This is 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago, the Alternative Influence Network, this viral fake news study, which smeared me and other YouTubers as, again, manipulating, lying, conspiracy theories, partnering with white nationalists, fake news. And they're creating it so that media outlets like Fox News or otherwise will run the story and say, experts agree, Candace Owens is a bad person. Why do it? Why do it? You're not convincing anybody. If your argument is that Candace Owens is a serpent Pharisee and she's tricking the masses, well, then she's certainly better at it than you. Let me put it this way. I wouldn't purport to know enough about the psychological tendencies of Candace Owens or otherwise, to argue that she is or is not anything other than a successful personality in media for the past decade or whatever, who has built a show and a loyal following. And what I can say is, well, I certainly don't agree with her on a lot of the things she's been talking about politically more recently. I will say that going back like 3 years ago, I went on her show and she was spot on, and I agreed with most of what she was saying as it related to politics of the era. With all due respect, I don't largely follow her show. She's made claims that I believe to be false, but I haven't. If you're going to criticize me as saying this. I don't actually watch Candace's show. So if the people who are fans of Jordan Peterson like Tim, he's actually right about Candace. I'm like, okay, well, like I watch some of her show sometimes, but I don't really follow it all that much. I don't agree with her mostly on her political views, but I will just say this. I take that back. We probably agree overwhelmingly on a lot of things. We probably disagree on a decent amount. You will never convince anybody that psychopaths are taking over by using the institutional attack. That is what we largely had a problem with wokeness. For Jordan Peterson to team up with experts, come together and then be like, we've determined that these people are using the Lord's name in vain and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I will determine for myself whether I believe that she is blaspheming or otherwise. I'm not a Christian, but I'm saying I can read her tweets, dude. She says this in response to Peterson. This is indistinguishable from the time when the COVID experts produced baseless reports claiming that those who refused to get the vaccine or stay home were extremists who suffered from psychopathic tendencies. She's right. And I'm not saying that Peterson's arguments are all wrong about the dark tetrad and things like that. I'm saying when you produce these expert analyses, which call your political opponents extremist psychopaths, you convince nobody. Nobody. And then here's the problem. I lived in West Virginia. Okay. Doctor told me not to get vaccinated, so I just followed my doctor's orders. And we went out and did whatever we wanted. I am not a psychopathic extremist. So when that report comes out, I'm like, that's fake. Then when they do similar things, claiming that Candace Owens, or I have no idea who else he's referring to be completely honest, are Pharisees and parasites, I'm like, I instantly distrust you. Instantly. Because I have been a victim of these smear campaigns from the experts on more than one occasion for being a YouTuber who simply fact-checked the media. And at the time they accused me of this, I was supporting Democrats. It was insane. That's how maniacal these people were. So I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing this game. If you want to argue with Candace Owens, you have to confront her to her ideas. Because even if she actually is the psychopath that Jordan Peterson thinks she is, she has arguments behind her that some would argue are better than yours. Accusing someone of being a psycho doesn't change their political position, nor does it counter the argument they made. So Candace Owens comes out and says the bombing of children in Gaza is wrong. And the response being, yeah, well, you're a psychopath. I go, well, I'm kind of interested in what Candace has to say about that. I mean, she's made a point. I'm interested in hearing more details. You just kind of insulted her and called her crazy. You never actually challenged her idea. It was supposed to be that the marketplace of ideas won. I feel that what Jordan Peterson is engaging in right now is not that. So by all means, I would say this. Jordan Peterson engaging with Candace's statements directly. When she says Christ is king, say, I don't believe you're genuine. But that's still just an opinion statement. If she says, I have a position on Israel and Palestine, argue against it and say, here's why I think you're wrong. This is the fascinating thing about why I find myself on the right or whatever. I can criticize Elon Musk. He still follows me and retweets me. I criticize him quite a bit. I'm a big fan, by the way, though. You know, so it's fascinating that you get people saying, why don't you criticize Elon? Well, I largely like what he does. I mean, space travel, Neuralink for healing paraplegics, these things are very, very good. Restoring free speech to a great degree on X, very good. Neuralink as a invasive AI integration tool is terrifying. X as an expansion of Grok and AI will be destructive to humans. So a little bit more negative on this. And he's got a bunch of kids, and I think kids should have dads. So I'm very critical of Elon having as many kids and operating the way he is. However, I think he's a net benefit overall. His personal moral failings are nothing compared to his scientific research expansion, and there's good things there. I can criticize Elon. He still retweets me. I can criticize Charlie Kirk on the TikTok thing as I have. I got to be honest. I actually agree with Charlie Kirk on most things. So I had relatively little to criticize him on. But the TikTok thing I did. Charlie ain't mad. He just says, well, we'll talk about it. He'll sit down with Bill Maher. How is that the case? I know that if I said, I've got an issue with Candace Owens' position on insert issue, she'd say, what's your problem? And then I'd say, here's my issue. She'd be like, well, I think you're wrong. And I'd be like, okay. And that would be the end of it. We would argue on X. And then that would be the end of it. This is the problem with woke. This is the reason why I can't stand the liberal left, because they say, agree with me or else. Now, the right does that sometimes, but it's not a tendency. The left does it all the time. Ultimately, the point is this. I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson and his work for the most part. I am. Candace Owens, actually, she has a really good show. Haven't listened to it predominantly in more recent times. I know she's been heavily criticized for her position on Jews. I've been more critical of, I think she called Lyndon B. Johnson Jewish, and I believe he was a Protestant. So, But I'm not here to assert my position that she's a crazy person for having said the things that she says. In fact, she's critical of the moon landing story. And I said, well, to be honest, the media lies to us all the time. And it's not in the realm of fiction to argue that the U.S. would have staged the moon landing. Personally, I think the moon landing happened. I'm not going to insult Candace because she says a thing I don't believe. That's silly. And it doesn't move the conversation forward. Anyway, look, drama, I guess. I shouldn't rant on this any longer. You get the point. You know what? I got that's it, I suppose. Let me know what you guys think, because this is the IDW divide or whatever. It's the woke right versus the classical lib or something. Whatever. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all in a little bit.